Welcome to the 313 Men, Money, and Marriage podcast, the podcast where facts, logic, and reasoning are at the forefront of every conversation. I am your host, Andrew Johnson, and I'm here today with my guest, Mr. Greg's Take, and we're going to be talking about the 5 stages of wealth. So as we go ahead and continue on this particular topic, it came to me about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, because I see a lot of people out here when I, watch, certain video clips and different things like that on the internet. And I'll see certain people saying that they make a certain dollar amount. And as the young people say, I always call cap, because the numbers don't line up with what they're saying they're making. So what we wanted to do is I wanted to go through the 5 classes of wealth, so that people understand exactly where they're at and know how much they got. And the reason why I call cap on it is just simply because you'll see as we go through the levels of wealth, the percentage of people who are in each different category lets you know that the people who are coming on some of these platforms are not making the amount of money that they actually say they are making. So without further ado, Greg, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me again, Andrew.
Great. Greg has been on the show multiple times. And like I said, he's sort of a fan favorite. People like it when he comes on because of the way he explains things. And he makes it pretty clear. So we're going to jump right into it and talk about this. And we're going to start with the 5 classes. I'm going to go from the lowest to the highest so that there's no misconceptions or anything about what actually is or what isn't. And we're going to go from the lowest to the highest, and we're going to just go from there. And we're going to get Greg's input after each class. So I'm going to be asking him questions for, say, after we go through each one, to give you an idea, basically, of what's going to be happening throughout the show. So we're going to start with the lower class. And the lower class is very simple. It's just these are individuals in this particular bracket typically have incomes below the poverty line. So these would be technically people who are living in poverty because they're earning less than $25,000 a year. Now, to put it in perspective, that's about $12.50 an hour is $25,000 a year. So they're making that or less. And this is for a single individual. The population of adults who fall into this category is going to be anywhere between 10 to 15% of our population. So this lower class is basically people who live below the poverty line and are making roughly about $12 an hour or $12.50 an hour or less. So with that number, Greg, first of all, I'm going to sort of ask you a question. It's going to be sort of before we get to the class question, more of a macro question, meaning like, what are your thoughts on these 5 levels of wealth in general? And then we'll get to the actual micro question pertaining to the lower class. So what are your thoughts on the 5 levels of wealth?
Well, I mean, in general, anytime we look at something, this is how our brains work: categories, numbers, a graph. We need to see something. So we say, okay, this is what we're going to look at. It doesn't mean we have everything in perfect numbers and perfect order and perfect fashion, but we got to be able to look at something and wrap our arms around it. This thing about lower class, working class, middle class, and upper, and the high net worth, it's been going on for centuries. So this is a pretty simple way that we can flow through this, in my opinion, and say, okay, you're listening, maybe you're young, maybe you're not young. It doesn't matter. You're like, okay, I got a general idea of kind of where I'm at, but this is not about how much am I worth as a human being. These are just numbers, because we work, we earn money, and we pay our bills. So Andrew's putting this thing together to give us kind of an idea of, kind of where am I at sort of in this quote unquote hierarchy, and then maybe spark the imagination and the ideas of, well, what does that mean to me? What does it mean to the people around me? Do I want to move up? Do I want to stay where I'm at, et cetera?
Good. And the question that goes with the particular class level is, what are your thoughts? You have your thoughts on the classes in general, but what are your thoughts of the lower class per se? Like, obviously, you want them to go up, but some people do. Well, I ask you this question: do you think that there's some people who are just going to be destined to just have to go through this class for the rest of their lives, or what can they do to change their outlook?
Well, I've struggled with this through my life thinking, well, I have this one idea and I stick with that idea and don't want to change on it. I've softened. I'm 55 now. There will be people, in my opinion, that stay in a certain class for whatever the reasons are. We're not going to get into that. They're myriad. There's many of them. Some people are comfort at any one of these 5 levels, right? It depends on who we talk to, where they came from, what their motivation is. I would like to think, only because, like, well, what level am I at? I know where I'm at in the scheme of this. And I remember being down in number 1. That was my first banking job. They offered me $26,000 a year. And I didn't give a crap about insurance. I needed work. And that's where I got started. And then slowly, we kind of eked our way up, for lack of a better word. But I think it depends on the individual, Andrew. I would think, why would anybody want to stay at 25 a year and do nothing but struggle? But I have to understand, someone may want to, and you may scream and go, no, no one would want to stay there. I talk to a lot of people that are getting ready to lose their house in my professional dealings. Some people simply do not have the knowledge that we have, that you're getting here, and they do not know a better way to do things. And that's hard for me because the education is out there. This is what we're doing here now, sharing this with you to open your peripheral vision and hopefully give you a vision, a different way to look at things.
That's an interesting point because I think there are systematic factors that contribute a little bit to the lower class of wealth. However, I don't think they're an excuse as much as more. I'll say they're a mitigating factor. So they meaning that you can still come out of the situation. It's just a matter of how, do you have the knowledge and the fortitude or, maybe a mentorship type thing that can help you come out of it. Because it's not impossible to do it. It's just a matter of you having that the mental fortitude and the knowledge, because it's going to always boil down to what you know. So then what you know, and then after that is who you know. So the higher up on the scale, the better off your situation will probably end up being. The next area, the second class I do want to go into, is what we call the working class. And the working class is pretty straightforward as well. It's just these are people whose income is generally between 25,000 and 50,000 annually. They tend to be younger, obviously, and they're the largest segment of the population. It's anywhere between 1/3 to 40% of our population live in this particular category where they're making between 25 and 50. And Greg, you talked about it when you were first started working at the job at the bank. Your salary was right on par with mine when I first started to work on the job that I ultimately made a career of. And I was making about the same thing that you were making when I first started. And I thought that was the greatest thing in the world because I actually had a full-time job. Yeah. So it's obviously we would both fall into the working class at that point, but it's where I say the biggest percentile of people are actually living. And that salary wise, again, looking at $12.50 an hour up to about $25 an hour. And I bring this number up, and I want to say this before I get Greg's input on this, is that a lot of people, I hear a lot of women, especially on dating shows and different things like that, say they will not date somebody who makes that little amount of money. And so, but that's literally, the biggest chunk of people in the United States on the percentage wise who makes that amount of money. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to continue to make that amount. They make more than that, but that's where we're at. So, Greg, this level 2, the working class, what are your thoughts on lifestyle choices that they make and maybe some of their spending habits?
Working class has been called the backbone of America. I think working and middle would be the backbone. But the interesting thing about this is, let's say I'm making 50, which is not what it was 20 years ago. It's not what it was 50 years ago. That's for damn sure. But let's say I'm making 50. Here's the thing. We look around us and we see what our neighbors are making. We see what other people are making, and we start getting ideas. And we see what they have, and we see what they do, and we see how they spend, and maybe we start getting ideas. But I do know one thing. The times when I've practiced consistency over years of a behavior in this area of more money, less money, debt, no debt. Consistency over time is really what wins the game. It's not taking down the big banger and making the big kill. Lion goes out. He's not going to kill 5 gazelles in one day. He's wanting to take one down, drag it back to the den, feed the family, rest, maybe make some more babies, and live to hunt another day. But we're kind of hooked on that instant, I'm going to take down the big one. It's the casino. It's the lottery ticket. And it's just, is it possible? Yes. But is it practical? No. I don't know if any of that made any sense.
It does, because a lot of it is, I think the working class and the middle class fall into this category. I talked about it when I did an episode called The Consumption Class, and I was referring to African Americans and their spending habits. And a lot of it is what you were just describing, that sort of keeping up with the Joneses, just trying to say, I got this amount and this amount. And it really gets to a point where, you're competing against people for things and stuff that loses its value over the course of time. But you are correct in suggesting that they are the backbone of our economy because they're the biggest spenders. They tend to be the bigger, rich people spend money too, and they make big luxury purchases, but they don't, because it's not that many of them, they don't spend, on a per capita, I guess, they might be higher, but, just simply because there's less of them, they don't spend quite as much as that bigger class does. So speaking of the middle class, we're going to go there and talk about them. And this number surprised me a little bit because I didn't know that where the level was, what was considered middle class, where it goes and where it stops. But according to the data that I collected, and it could be wrong, I mean, there's multitudes of people who have different data on this particular topic. But it says that middle class are defined by people, anyone who's making between $50,000 to $150,000 a year annually. Obviously, it's going to vary by geography. So urban versus rural. You live in a rural area, you might not need to make as much, but it's anywhere between 50 and 150,000. And it's approximately 40%, 40 to 50%. It's actually larger than the working class per se of households. So if you combine the two together, this is the working class and the middle class is probably about 70 to 75% of all of us, fall into this category. And that's why I was saying earlier how the statistics play a role into it, that, most people aren't making what they say they're making. But this group is making anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000 a year. So Greg, with this middle class group, how is education and home ownership, retirement savings, how does those things impact this group? Because generally speaking, and not all cases, but generally speaking, this is the income level where you start to do these types of things, where you might be more educated. You will start to talk about home ownership. You go from renting to owning your own home, and you start saving for your future with retirement. So what are your thoughts on this third level, the middle class, pertaining to those three things?
First of all, there's nothing magic about moving into this category, 50 to 150. Now, is there a big difference between 25 grand and 50 to 150? You better believe it. Life-changing difference. You can drive freight trains wide through this gap. But keep in mind, there are as many people, in my opinion, in this 50 to 150 that think and spend just like people in the 25,000 a year. They're just living paycheck to paycheck. And this is not a bash on them. It's not a shaming of them. This is all about mindset. And when you mentioned an important word that I think it's losing its luster at the institutional level, a lot more people are getting away from the idea of, if I don't go to college, I'll never be able to make this kind of money, whatever that kind of money is. We're starting to see that that's not necessarily true. But even then, I could have every degree in the world. If I do not have financial discipline, and I think that a bunch more will never be enough, I might as well be making 25. So it varies. A lot of it has to do with what's available to me in terms of what can I learn. And it doesn't necessarily mean college. I want to impress upon you, if you're listening and you're a young person, You may not know just how much power you hold in your hand when you look at the cell phone that you use on a daily basis to surf the internet and to watch YouTube and to learn and to grow. You could, that technology that you hold in your hand that's called an iPhone is more computing power than it took to put a man on the moon. And that is a fact. So we have a lot available to us, but sometimes we just don't see it. I don't know if that helped or not.
Well, Greg, it does, and I'll say this: you're touching on a subject matter that we did talk about before on the show a while back. And what we said is that, we were talking about it from the dating standpoint, how women tend to look for men who make, the classic 6-figure income. And what they're unaware of is that approximately 20% of the people who fall into that income category live check to check, just as you were describing. And the reason being is they're hyper consumers. They buy nice things. They spend, a hefty penny for, quality things that what they deem to be quality purchase. Maybe it makes them look more influential amongst their peers, or whatever the case may be. They are hyper consumers. So these are people who look the part, but may not actually be the part, just simply because they're spending all that money. Pertaining to retirement, generally speaking, these are people who are going to start to have those jobs where it's more career based. You're more salary than, say, hourly. The job is going to offer 401k plans and different things like that. You're going to get benefit packages, things to that effect, that you'll pick up. And so they do have somewhat of a plan for their future, but they're also, like you did state earlier, spending as well. So the unfortunate part with this group here, the middle class, is that there's going to be some people who are going to be, because they got caught up in the hyper consumerism, who, when as they get older, are going to really struggle once they get close to retirement age. And they're probably going to have to work longer than maybe they intended, just simply because they didn't prep themselves properly for saving for retirement, because they were these types of consumers. So that's where I think you might run into a problem with some of them. The next area we are going to get into is what they call upper class. Some people call it upper middle class, but it's upper class per se. The way to describe it is these are people who tend to earn above $150,000 a year, and they tend to be more professionals. So these are your doctor, lawyers, business owners, business professionals, people along these lines. And they make up approximately, they say 10 to 15% of the U.S. population. I think that's a little high. I don't think it's quite that high, but I mean, it could be. I'd go closer on the 10% side than I would say 15. But these are people who make good money. They tend to live in better neighborhoods. They tend to have nicer houses. I guess, I don't know if the term gated community came from upper middle class or upper class people or not. But Greg, your thoughts on the lifestyle choices and investment impacts of upper middle class or upper class, education and networking. So like when you get to this level, I mean, obviously you can do things without a college degree now. It's a little bit easier. A college degree on average is still going to pay more than a person who doesn't have one. Just that's what the numbers bear out. However, you were right about the phone. The part I want to get with this upper class group is their education, investments, and networking. They have access to people who can make them even more money. So do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I have a chiropractor that I've been going to for 24 years now. He obviously went to school. He and his wife met while they were in school. She worked her ass off to help get him through school. They live north of me, great people. They have been steady for the entire 25 years I've known them. Their character, their habits, how they live, this, that, and a third. So these are going to be the professionals just like you're describing. And the thing of it is, these people can also live either paycheck to paycheck or deal to deal. It always varies on, the individual, but you're absolutely right. Doors can open because think about it. If you hang around with skunks all the time, usually that's really all you're around is skunks all the time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm being silly. People with money, people with education, they hang around different people. They have access to different people. Now, you made me think of something really, really simple here, Andrew. I want you to think about this. If you do not have a savings account, a checking account, you say, well, Greg, I tried. I don't have a high enough credit score. I can't get a checking account. That used to be something that would keep you out of a whole lot of these echelons of these numbers that we're looking at. Because without a checking account, you are not plugged into the economy, typically speaking. And there's a ton of people in the world, the number is staggering, that are unbanked. That's the word that's used. But the iPhone has changed that. All of these apps give you access to a lot of things now. But if you're not plugged into that, then your access to capital can be very limited. And you could say, well, Greg, I run my own business. I run an all cash business. Well, how much money can you stash underneath your mattress and be risked by fire or theft or natural disaster until you say, well, I'm going to plug in to the they system, to the those people that live up above me system. It's like we can't have both. We can't deny the wealthy and deny the smarter than us and deny the higher educated than us, but have what we want, the cake and eat it too. And there just sort of comes a time when it's like, okay, maybe I just want to play the game a little bit in my way, but I got to play it a little bit in the system's way too. So this is a really, really, really big topic, and it causes people to have emotions and some anger and some excitement, some denial. It varies across the board, but this is part of the human experience, and money is a big deal. You can't live without it.
Definitely. They say as you go, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. But I want to share a story with you on that pertaining to what you were just talking about, because it reminded me of something as you were saying it. And it goes back probably 20 years ago now. And you're saying how the phone has changed and evolutionized things since then. But I remember me and my cousin, we were in New York and we were in downtown Brooklyn, and, we were just shopping and everything. And, we were just looking, we saw the Verizon store, was down there. And then so I just noticed that there was a long line, and the line went outside the door and went a little bit further down the block.
Wow.
And I just asked my cousin out of the blue, I says, why is the line so long, to go into the Verizon store? This was on Saturday, and that's there's a new phone coming out or something. And my cousin said, no, they're paying their bill. Wow. And so my logic was, well, why don't they just mail it in? And my cousin said, because they don't have any checking accounts, they pay cash.
Right. That's right. And there's kiosks now that I think will take your cash where you can just pay your bill. Yeah.
Yeah. And so not even thinking about it, I just was sitting there saying, I was like, well, looking back on it, huge immigrant area. So I guess that would make sense. But now with the phone, you can do a lot of the stuff mobile, on your cell phone, where, there's different, not necessarily banks, but things along the line of a bank where you can, keep and store some of your money and, make payments and transactions right through it. So that's what has changed since then. But absolutely what you were saying pertaining to the networking, what I was getting at with the networking is that they are able, this group of people are able to do maybe certain investments and deals that, say middle class and working class can't do, because they just have access to different groups of people who can put them into a network where they can make even more money.
Yeah.
Versus say those other 2 classes I just mentioned.
And who do people give jobs to? People they know, trust, and love, family and
Absolutely.
friends. Who do they give stock tips to, or I found this, or this works for me? Can you imagine if every single person who was born had to start from the beginning of all human knowledge from day one? Are you kidding me? We'd be amoebas at this point.
Exactly.
So it's an accumulative thing. It's an accumulative thing. So
sure.
I got
the last area I do just want to cover is the wealthy, which is the top class. And these are high net worth individuals. And it's not necessarily with them. It's not about salary, but it's about net worth, is how we kind of measure this class. And these are people who have a net worth of over $1 million, essentially. They have over $1 million in, assets, subtracting their liabilities. and they are, the higher class. So they probably made a bunch of money at some point. Maybe they don't now, but they have accumulated enough wealth to maybe they don't even have to work. Maybe they don't have to do quite a few things. They just automatically get these benefits. And so, these are the people, as they say, live off of their investments. These are groups of people who sit by the swimming pool and collect the dividend checks, or those types. Okay. And so, but to be classified as wealthy, they're basically saying you need $1 million in assets. My question to you is, with the upper middle class, how much this is the impact, the economic impact and political decisions do they have over the other classes? So it's two questions to this, but the first one is, this upper class, do they have that power and impact to affect the other classes once you get to this level?
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on for centuries, well before we formed cities. People with assets that could have been goats, it could have been yak, it could have been anything, coffee, tobacco. The people with the most assets have the most influence in a tribe, in a family, in a group of people. This is human nature. But in this quote modern world, we see it at a high level, and I used to think, this is evil. These people are greedy. And there's always going to be evil, greedy people. You can't get around it, right? In my opinion, there will never be a utopia of pure equality across the board in every strata of human experience. So the thing is, people that have a high net worth, they go to certain country clubs. I don't fault them for that. They hang out with people that do the same stuff that they do, talk the same way they talk, and do the same things that they do. It's the same thing. Like, I don't hang around habitually with people that make $20,000 a year. And it's just, to me, it's human nature. But we can get into crazy conversations about, well, certain people are being held back. All I know is this. I was making $3.35 an hour at a pizza joint in high school. I don't make $3.35 an hour at a pizza joint anymore. Am I doing what I'm doing, sitting where I'm sitting, because I'm amazingly smart with a high IQ? No. I just knew that slowly over time, if I kept moving forward, something might shake loose. But yes, people with money get stuff done. Did you know that historically the most common occupation for someone who is elected to a political office in Washington, D.C. and in other areas is lawyer? When you know how to write law, you can influence millions of people's lives. It's been that way for quite some time. I don't know if that
Communication in
helped at all.
general. No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Communication in general. You're a good communicator.
Yeah.
You're going to definitely impact people's lives. That's one skill that, if I was to tell any young person starting out that they need to master, I would say your ability to communicate orally and in writing. I mean, those two keys are, if you know how to do that, you'll probably you're on your way. That's about 40% of it right there, at least in my opinion, my
You,
humble opinion.
you made a good point, and I know this is an old organization, maybe based on your audience's, age range. There's a thing called Toastmasters. Yeah, it's kind of old, and yeah, it seems kind of crusty, but it's still out there. It's very active. I've been to it before, even after having been in radio. Go and learn public speaking, because I'm going to echo what Andrew just said. When you can speak eloquently, and I don't mean like some highbrow person, but when you can communicate effectively your thoughts, and you can speak clearly, and you're well read or you're well spoken, I promise you, doors will be opened. And I don't mean here's $20 million, have a nice day. Even small doors in the beginning will be open to you that you may not even be aware of, because people have a conscious and a subconscious perception about you based on what comes out of your mouth. And when it's sloppy and crappy and it's just doesn't make any sense, who do you think they're going to hire, everything else being equal, except that, when they're comparing you to the next person who's trying to get the job that you're trying to get? Well, they don't like my part of this about me, and they don't like that part about me. Be really, really honest. I had to be like, When I go for a job interview, I don't wear a suit because I don't apply for those kinds of jobs. I shave, I brush my teeth, I make sure my clothes are ironed. That stuff goes a long way because whether you like it or not, people are going to make an instantaneous, built into the human computer, subconscious judgment about you. And there's nothing you can do to change it. Nothing. After that first impression has been made.
Yes. I say that first 30 seconds plays a huge role.
God built us that way.
Yeah, last quick question. I know we're running short on time, but last quick question I just want to ask you is about some of this group, some of their wealth accumulation strategies. What are your thoughts on that real quick?
No matter what it is that we're making dollar-wise, we need a plan to put some of it aside. How big is your shovel means how big is your paycheck. So if I'm making 25 grand a year, or I'm in this level that we're talking about, past the 150,000 a year, if I'm not saving a piece of that or doing something with that to invest it, meaning I don't have to get up and go to work to make the money, meaning if I stop working, I no longer can live my lifestyle. I got to put something to the side. And you don't have to be in this category making 150 or more to save, unless you are literally living on the street, living hand to mouth. You can save something. If you own a cell phone, you can save, no matter what the amount is. We have to take a portion of the seed, as a certain book says, because why? We need to be able to plant next year's crop. And if we don't save some seed, we can't plant the next crop.
Got it. And so the importance of, even when you're not doing well financially, saving is paramount and key.
It's a habit.
Yes, it becomes, make it a habit. Yep. Their accumulation strategies is kind of what we had already touched on, with some of the investments that they may have. They have stocks, they have bonds, they have a variety of different things, ETFs, you name it. And they tend to, like I said, put a certain amount into those accounts. And basically, as those accounts grow, they essentially live off of them.
Over time.
Over the course of time. Exactly. Yeah. Well, we are about to wrap up. I want to say thank you to Greg for coming on again and talking about this particular matter. And Greg, if you have anything that you want to talk about or promote pertaining to, I know you have a podcast, so if you want to talk about that, you can.
It's been a while. I typically haven't been doing my own stuff for quite a while now. And I shared with you off mic. My mic has been cold a lot lately. There's nothing inside me that I'm feeling the need or the urge to share with the world. God is just telling me, Greg, you just don't have anything interesting to say right now. Now that may change because I love this format. I love helping people in any way that I can. But if I could give you any advice as a young person out there listening, it's this. There's only one asset that really you can't replace. Money doesn't buy it. And it's the most valuable that we all have, and it's time. Now, health is amazingly important, yes, but time. You can never take back the time, and you can't buy more of it. You can stay healthy and live as long as you can possibly live. But in the end, look at Andrew and I. I'm 55. He and I are basically in the same age range. We've got limited runway, not only for wealth building, wealth accumulation, but also for our physical lives. And I'm telling you, man, you're like, I'm 20. Yes, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. But you've got to form these habits and think of it like taking a bath every day, brushing your teeth, tying your shoes, whatever it is, changing the oil in your car. And over time, the consistency is what pays off.
Got it. You're right about the age factor, because every morning that I get up, I hear a new joint make a funny sound when I get up out the bed.
Like, was that a spring in the bed, honey? Do we need a new bed? No, honey, this is foam memory. That's not exactly a spring in the bed.
All right. Pertaining to the podcast, there's always going to be a link in the show notes with the website. You can click on that link. You can become a member of the email list. Like I said, we're going to be doing some lives coming up really soon, so be part of that. We've already done 1 or 2 already. We're going to try and do some more. In addition, there's an Instagram page. It's called The 313 Men Money Marriage. The number 313 Men Money Marriage, all crammed together one word, where you will see clips of previous shows and pictures of previous guests. You can go check that out. Lastly, there is a YouTube channel. It is called the Men, Money, and Marriage Hour, and we also post clips there, and sometimes we'll do the full episode length there, depending on what the episode was about. So you can go there and watch and get caught up if you want to watch video. If you don't have Spotify, the video podcasts all go on Spotify, and Spotify will show you the video clip, but if the rest of it goes to audio. but sometimes there'll be something on the YouTube channel. You can watch some previous episodes there as well. So with that being said, like I said, we thanking Greg for coming back on. And until we meet again, we are out.